What it do, guys, and welcome back to another video. Now, in today's video, we're going to be going over a Vault Steel Path build with a Augment BAM that you're going to see on the screen here, and this is going to be centered around a melee influence. And when I tell you it's absolutely effortless and the word brain dead, because it just is, you are going to melt loads of things, and they're not even going to know that you've melted them because of how quick you're going to be doing it as well. So if that interests you, stick around. Let's go ahead and tell you what you do need to go know, starting things off with his abilities. All right, so let's go ahead and move my camera up here. So, passive. Now, basically, whilst Vault is in connection with the floor, so this is going to be walking, sprinting, sliding, or rolling, he'll basically build up an electric damage that will be added onto his weapon attack or ability class up to a maximum of 1,000 bonus damage. Now, I'm just going to show you kind of what this looks like anyways, because it's way easier if you guys go ahead and see things like this. It's going to be located in the top right, so if I go ahead and pause that, I can show you right there. There's the damage. Increased damage to your next shot. Again, do keep in mind, it's also on abilities as well. It doesn't just have to be on weapon shot. But if I go ahead and shoot here, thankfully, well, I have nothing there. If I go and move a little bit, you can see it rebuilding back up. And if I go and shoot here, I don't have electric on this weapon, okay? So the fact that I'm proccing electric off of that shows you that it also scales its electric chance from the weighting within your weaponry and so forth. So I'm just going to show you what I was using here. Okay, that's all I've got, but I used a very high status. But keep in mind, my puncture is 88% right here. So I do want to go and build that electricity up a little bit more. The more that you go and build it up, the more that you're contesting against your builds. But yes, it'll work very, very well. It can proc melee influence on its own, which is also really good with it. And do keep in mind, the electricity from the passive as well is a separate electricity, as in, like, it cannot be combined into something else like radiation or like blast or whatever. It's just electric, all right, which is great. So up next, we have got his first ability, which is shock. Now, when aiming at an enemy and casting, Vault will basically go and send out an electric zap over an infinite range, which will go and hit the enemy and then chain link with guaranteed electricity towards other nearby enemies. Now, you will need line of sight on this, but when I tell you guaranteed, like, infinite range, it's infinite, as in, like, I put those enemies all the way over there, and if I zap, it's just gonna go all the way out. So if I just jump up on this for now and I look at the one all the way at the back and I zap them, you see that? Gives you like a rough idea, considering the fact that, I mean, that's 50 odd meters away, and he's yapping. It's about 50 odd meters away, and I can still go and zap onto them. And then when I zap onto them, it then chain links onto other enemies nearby. I believe it chains up to about 5 enemies. Again, it does require a line of sight. It does go and synergize with your passive. So if you are moving around and then you go and use one, you see how my passive just disappears. So I'll show it one more time. So you see how that will just be added into the damage, and it also goes ahead and synergizes with his third ability, an electric shield, but we will get to that later. The last thing that you need to go know about shock is that it is his subsumable option, which means everything you go and see here with shock can be given over to other warframes if you go ahead and subsume Vault to the helmet. Up next, we have got his second ability, which is called Speeds. Now, Vault is basically going to increase his movement speed of himself and nearby allies. That's kind of like the overall gist of it, but let's go ahead and go a little bit more in depth with that as well. So he will also go ahead and gain a 25% reloads to his weapons. Now, reload, the buff itself is additive to things like fast hands, quick draw, all of these other buffs. All right, so it's just going to be added towards those mods. Now, he also gets his 75% melee attack speed, which, as you could imagine, is going to be really good if we're going to be doing the melee build. And he also gets a 75% movement speed as well. Now, the melee attack speed is going to be additive again to mods. Basically, the reload and the attack speed are additive to mods, so Fury, Quickening, Berserker, whatever. But the movement speed is multiplicative to mods. So it's got its own category here that is really going to amplify. So if you go and use things like rush, sprint boost, speed drift, whatever, you can amplify them further by also just basically utilizing your second ability here. Now, for those who end up, have you ever played with a Vault in your group, or after this video you might end up playing with some of your friends and they might go a little too quick? Now, if you're a little bit ADHD, and there's no harm in this, a little bit ADHD, you really want to go quick, all right? I believe in there's such a thing as going too quick, but for those who end up getting this, I'm just going to teach you something real quick. If you end up pressing 2, and there's a Vault in your group, and he gives you a speed buff, and you're like, oh my god, he's put way too much strength on this, I can barely control myself. If you just basically backflip, you will remove the buff off of you. Okay, so one more time, if there is a Volt in your group and they go ahead and give you the speed buff and you don't want the speed buff, you yourself backflip. You will remove the buff off of you. Okay, it's just a good way to go ahead and then control your Warframe. I believe there is such a thing as going too quick. All right. Besides from that, Volt helps particular units as well, like defection missions to speed up the units to get from where they need to go. And you can also go and help things like drones inside bounties and planes of Eidolon and so forth. So it's a really, really good ability. Now, this does also go and synergize with his passive as well, as in if I go and activate it, I will cover more ground quicker. Okay, as you can go and see here, it's a quicker way to go and build up the passive. Lovely stuff. All right. Up next, we have got his third ability, which is going to be called Electric Shields. Now, Electric Shields is basically going to be quite, I mean, there's very little to go off in that text. I've just realized that my notes are way bigger than this, but anyways, so Electric Shield is basically going to be a shield that Volt deploys in front of him, like so. Now, it's going to be dependent on your energy cutter as well, so it might look different for you guys, just depends what energy that you're using on your Warframe. And as you could go see, it's just a shield like this. Now, first things first, if you walk up to the middle of it, you do get an option to go and pick up the shields. Now, you will end up changing it from more like a horizontal shield, as you go and see here, into more of like a vertical shield right in front of you. Okay, so we'll go and change the overall width and dimension of the shields, but you can end up making it face the direction you are looking, and that's going to be important because there's now two things that Electric Shield's going to go and do. Number one, when Electric Shield is deployed in front of you, any enemies that try to shoot through the shields, like so, if you're standing on one side of the shield and they're standing on the other, it will block the projectiles. It'll block their shots. They can't go ahead and hurt you. They can't damage you. So it's going to be a survival tool. The second thing is when you shoot through the shield, you're actually going to increase your damage, and you're going to increase it in a way that you get 50% bonus electric damage to your weapons, and you get a 1x final critical multiplier. Now, you can actually stack down to a maximum of 6 of these shields, all right? So you could do like one here, you could go and do one there, you could go and do one there. You kind of get the idea. Most people will go and do it on like defense objectives, like defend something, whatever. But what you could also go and do is, if I did it like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if I did cast another one, it would just replace the first one. But if I now shoot through this, the electric damage that was 50% ramps up per shield that I put down. So you actually get more increased damage when you put down more shields to shoot through. But the final critical multiplier does not increase, because that would be crazy if you got a 600% critical multiplier off of that, since they're 100% each. That's nuts. No, unfortunately that doesn't increase, but you can increase your overall damage as well. So let's go ahead and shoot my passes off here. So when I go ahead and now shoot onto an enemy there you go. I can also go ahead and get the electric proc coming off of that as well. So shooting through the shield is also going to give me a chance to go ahead and get electricity. And again, that electric is similar to the passive, because you see I didn't have the passive when I shoot in there. It's similar to the passive, as in it does not combine with other elements, which again can be great for particular builds. Again, especially melee influence with certain projectiles. We'll get to that a little bit later as well. Melee attacks themselves don't actually benefit when you're hitting through the shields, but again, like I said, certain melee projectiles, not things like glaives, certain melee projectiles will go ahead and benefit from you just going shooting through the shields. You'll have to use the Warframe Wikipedia, because I'm sure there's going to be patch by patch instances where certain things are going to work and certain things don't work. All right. Is there anything else on my note here? Oh, it does go ahead and synergize with the first ability. So if I go and put the shield down, and now if I go and use shock, I can now zap the shields, and what's going to happen here is 100% of the damage of shock is going to go into the shields. To simplify that, instead of me like spamming shock on multiple different enemies, I can now just shock the shields and now run the shield through them. Does that make sense? It's more about if they go through the shield rather than me going through the shield on them, but they will end up taking the damage through that as well. And if you do end up sprinting, as you can see, you can just knock them out of the way, so they're not going to be that much of a problem as well. And furthermore, your passive increases your shock, and your shock increases the conversion damage over towards your electric shields. Yes, okay, so that's also how that's working as well. There's a lot going on there, but that should mostly be about it. Besides from the only other thing to go ahead and say here is the damage is additive to mods like Shock and Touch and so forth. So if you're looking at like modification for mods inside your build, it's going to be like a Shock and Touch, like those 90% mods, those 60% mods, it's additive to those. And it's one of the only very few abilities that your operator can actually benefit from. As in, if you now go ahead and shoot through the shield, yes, you still get that electric damage, but most importantly, you go and get that critical multiplier, which is why Volt is absolutely amazing for quite a lot of like end game activities, Eidolons, Prophet Takers, Orb Mothers, all of this different stuff and so forth. Volt is just a very, very good Warframe, and that electric shield ability is also very good. Right, now we got one more to go ahead and cover real quick. It is going to be a Discharge. Let me go and scroll my notes down right now. Oh my goodness. Right, so Discharge. So what's going to happen here is Volt is going to end up on cast. Volt's going to end up sending out a Discharge. Hitting any enemy will go ahead and stun them, and it will spread and chain, linking electricity towards other nearby enemies. So let me go and show you what that looks like if I go ahead and stand. Oh, I didn't summon any new enemies in. So let me go ahead and stand over here really quickly. And I'm just going to stand over here because I don't want to cover all of the enemies. I only want to cover some of them. So I've tested this a few times. So I'm going to stand right here. And as you can see, I only really reached these two, but the electricity then zapped and then hit other enemies. Now, what you will go and notice is you don't get that guaranteed electric proc coming through here. As you can go and see there's no electricity, whereas if I use my one, I would go ahead and get the electric proc off of that. Now, the one can be in tangent and can go ahead and be in synergy with the fourth ability there. It just basically emits a burst of the overall radial effect. That's all that's basically happening there. But for the most part, what's really good about the fourth is that it doesn't require things like line of sight. So I can hide behind a pillar and I can still go ahead and zap all of those enemies. So this is really, really good when it comes to like nuking benefits and so forth. There will be a whole bunch of Discharge builds that you can go and work with, Elite Sanctuary Onslaught, so forth, so forth. Now, do go and keep in mind there's a lot of ticking intervals. There's a lot of damage that can be amplified through ability strength, but this is definitely one of those other abilities as well where ability duration also really helps, because the electric procs that last 6 seconds are going to be scaling off your ability duration as well. So if you do want to go and get most out of this ability, not only would you amplify ability strength, but you definitely don't want to hurt ability duration a lot. Sometimes you might want to buff it just a little bit to get more ticks and get more overall dot from the ability. Now, it does go ahead and synergize with the passive as well, but the formula is like, what in the hell? I'm not going to sit here and even waste brain cells trying to explain it. Forgive me. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Well, hopefully it's up on the screen right now. Basically, long story short, and how to go ahead and how to explain this is the passive is actually amplifying the dots, the ticks that are basically happening there. That's all you really kind of need to know. All right, there is like a little bit of a return speed off of it, so it actually kind of implements it faster. But for the most part, just listen, it increases the dots. Okay, like that's basically what's going on there. The formula is so like, what in the world? This isn't traditional. Besides from that, I think I've covered all of the abilities. So yes, it's a bit of a mouthful, but there's a bit of a few things going on behind the scenes there, as you can go and see. So inside our build, we are going to be using an Augment. I'm going to be using the Augment called Shock Trooper. Now, if you go and hold to cast, you will go and grant all allies within 50 meters an additional 100% electricity damage to their attack. So this is guaranteed electricity damage just added in to whatever attacks and so forth that you're doing. Now, I do need to go and say a few things here. So this is what it would normally look like if I press the ability. If I now hold the ability, you see in the top right, 100% Shock Trooper right up there, additional electric damage on there. Now, do go and keep in mind the electric damage scales of things like ability strength and ability duration, so we can go ahead and bump that up. We can keep it buffed, but keep it active and keep it buffed by longer by bumping up ability duration, and we can get more return from how much bonus electric damage it has given us by bumping up our ability strength. So those are two values that you really want from this. The ability range is whether or not you want to go and give it over to your allies. For our build, we're going to be quite selfish. We're not giving anything over to our allies. Electric damage from weapons buffed by Shock Trooper do not activate the passive from Archon Stretch. So if you end up buffing towards your weapon and now you're going to go ahead and shoot with your weapon like here, and again, I don't have electric on my weapon, so that gives you an idea as to how easy that is to go and implement free electricity there. So if you go ahead and use things like Archon Stretch, my weaponry that is being buffed by the Shock Trooper augment is not actually proccing my Archon Stretch, okay? Which is why you won't see Archon Stretch on my build, in case you're generally curious as to why I don't have it, all right? Besides from that, it doesn't apply towards arc guns, and currently, and I'm going to put this right here on text, currently with the Warframe 1999 patch, this augment is currently bugged. It's not actually adding anything to the electric. So I know some people might be like, oh my, especially if they've skipped through this video, you guys can Pepe laugh at literally anybody who will say beneath, oh, but it doesn't work in the 1999. They clearly didn't watch the video then. I'm explaining it right now. It's currently bugged in 1999 in the 1999 patch, all right? So unfortunately, if you did use this augment right now, you're not really getting bonus anything. The only good thing that you are doing is giving the electricity over towards your weaponry, okay? Because again, I don't have electric on my weapon here, so how was I proccing electric? You get the idea? So it's still good for that, but it's not actually going to increase any electric damage that you're really doing, which is kind of a shame. Again, it's a bug. It will be fixed. So without further ado, let's go ahead and put the influence build, let's go and put my influence build up on here, and let me explain a few things. Please let me cook, and I'll explain like what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Number one, there's two values that you want to go off. Number one is strength, number two is duration. Now here's the thing. I prioritize duration over strength. I believe there is such a thing as going too quick. Titania taught me this. So if you go and look at it and be like, ooh, I wish I had more strength on my build, put more strength on your builds, okay? I can't control myself. I will go so damn quick if I keep putting strength on my build. There is such a thing as going too quick. So yes, I could go and get more value from my builds, but I'm not going to go ahead and do that, all right? For now, I would rather duration, that quality of life of not having to touch timers, because all of this is buffed. Shock Trooper, my first, is going to be on a timer. My second is going to be on a timer. The third of my shield blasting is going to be on a timer, and guess what I've got in here? Yes, it's going to be raw because it synergizes so well with melee influence builds, but we'll kind of talk about subsumables in a moment, okay? So anyways, so all of that is going to be timer heavy and timer based with duration. I prefer the durational timer. If you don't want that, bump up strength, okay? Now, from there onwards, everything else is just going to be, because you're not spamming an awful lot, you won't need an awful lot of energy or efficiency in here. A prime flow on someone like Volt actually yields him one of the biggest energy returns at 555 energy. It's an insane amount. And you'll also notice I actually have nothing in here helping energy. Nada. Nothing. We got no energize, we got no nourish, we got no equilibrium either. I don't need any of that. Believe me, I'm going to just deplete enemies and just enjoy every second of it. Because my duration's so high, I barely have to touch my abilities that often, so I can just focus on just running into enemies with a Nami solo or the Rakta Dagger, and I'll get to that in a moment, and we could just absolutely blitz them down, all right? So now I will go and say the energy spent on abilities is converted to shields between these three mods here is actually going to go ahead and help me quite a fair bit. I get 230% conversion here. Now this is going to be really good for shield gating properties. The one thing I will go and say about this build in general is once you've kind of sorted out your duration and you've sorted out your strength and you're happy with that, sort out your survival. Okay, sort out your survival. Now the Rakta Dagger is a really good survival method with this. I'll go and show you what it looks like, but furthermore, it's just you now need to go and survive, so chuck in whatever survival mod you want to. This is where I just use Arcane Blessing as a backup. You don't have to use Arcane Blessing, all right? You could drop that and put in Arcane Fury. You could drop that and put in Molt. Sorry, you could go and put in Arcane Fury. Sorry, in case you don't know what the arcanes are, I'll show you there. That's going to give you melee damage. You can go ahead and drop that. You can put in Molt Efficiency, which is going to give you even more ability duration. You could drop that, and you could go and put in things like Molt Augmented, which gives you ability strength on kill and allows your strength to go and scale. You could put whatever you want to in there, all right? I know it looks a little bit out of place with what I'm currently doing. I get that, but it works. That's all that matters for me, and it gives me a way that sometimes when my shield gating drops, the sun came out of nowhere, when the shield gating drops, I still have this good amount of base HP. I don't have great armor for it though, but I do have a good amount of base HP just chilling in the background. And sometimes with the new tile sets, with like new infested with a 1999, they'll hit me with toxin procs and so forth. It just allows me to go and switch my brain off and just run into them. And this is why I use things like Rolling Guard as a backup. So if my shields do go and drop, and if I don't have myself in a good position, or I have too much of an elemental proc on me, I could just roll in guard and reset it all and then just look after myself. Things like fast deflection are also going to go and work well in here. Things like catalyze and shields are also going to go and work well in here. Do keep in mind your third ability is going to stop things like projectiles, hit scans, so forth, hitting into you. So you're going to be hiding behind that in the most part, but it's only blocking this area in front of you. It's not blocking all of this around you from the sides and behind, all right? So just keep that in mind as you continue forwards. And then I've got the things like the Arcane Strike as well, which just gives me attack speed towards the melee weapon, which for an influence build is very no-brainer. Now, let me go and talk about the subsumable options here just really quickly. I'll go make sure I timestamp this as well. Do you need Rhino's Roar? No, not in the slightest. So let me go ahead and explain a few different things. I'm gonna give you quite a few. I'll put them up on the screen. There's genuinely a lot you can go off. Why am I using Rhino's Roar? I mean, it's in every build. Why am I using Rhino's Roar? Because I'm going to be doing an influence build, and because I'm doing things like gas, because I'm doing things like electric, because I'm doing all of these different combinations, Rhino's Roar allows those elements to double dip. So basically, I'm going to end up doing more damage because of this ability. Not needed. You'll see why I do so much damage. I don't need this, but it just allows me to clear. So here's some other abilities you can go with. My advice, durational abilities like Roar, Nourish, Raffle Advance. I mean, Raffle Advance doesn't really synergize with this, but if you don't want to go for a melee influence build, you can just go for a melee build and you're fine with that, so Raffle's fine. Lycus Hunt, War Cry, and then you got like some other weird ones that you can go and add in, Silence, and also a Phantom Eyes. Now, the reason why I say these abilities is because they're durational. Remember, this is a duration build. The goal is to just put loads of buffs on yourself and just run through everything. Okay, so anything that can basically last off a timer synergizes well. So you choose. There's nothing wrong if you want to put a Silence on here to help your survival and stop acolytes from taking all your buffs off of you and stop Eximus enemies from like trying to go and use a blast proc on you or whatever. You can do that, but keep in mind, with a Silence, we're losing range here. But the other things, Roar, Nourish, whatever, strength and duration work so well on these. Things like Silence and the Phantom Eyes, they'll struggle on the range side, but you get the idea. Now, there are recastables that you can also go and use in this build as well. And these are more what I would go and say for survival. So if you want to, Pillage, but again, hurts the range a little bit, but mostly it scales off duration. The only reason why I wouldn't like Pillage as much is because I then need to tap it again to recast it or to pull it back in and then give my shields. So it's a little bit annoying. But what you could go and do, which doesn't stop your movement, is Harrow's Condemn. But again, you might need a little bit of range in here. So just go and take like Augur Message or Augur Secrets out. You can go and put in things like Harrow's Condemn. Things like Molt from Saren, which gives you movement speed, and it's also going to go ahead and just give you a quick shield gain. But again, I've got speed anyway, so I don't really need the Molt, and it's also just going to make me way too quick, so I don't want that. And then there's also the Helm of Ability Rebuild Shields. It's a bit of a copium one, but I kind of looked at it and I was like, besides from the cooldown on this, I was like, it synergizes with what I'm looking at. I'll suggest it, but I wouldn't recommend it. Hey, listen, everyone's got their own different play styles. Don't bite my head off because I'm suggesting something. Now, there are things like Prime Sure-Footed, which could actually technically be taken out of the build, and you could end up putting in something like Najar's Firewalker, where you end up kind of coming back on the flames on yourself to give you that status immunity. So you can completely drop that and then put something in there, like Preparation or something if you wanted to, or more power strength, like Power Drift. You could end up dropping that out. And then there's other things like Invested Mobility as a Helmet ability that can also go and just give you overall more movement and sprint speed. Again, kind of like Molt, but way too much for me. So hopefully that explained like what's going on with the build there. Now I need to go and explain the Nami solo just really quickly, and it doesn't have to be Nami solo for melee influence. I'm going to show you two other builds really fast as well right after Nami solo, and I think one of them you'll be like, oh damn. So because it caught me off guard, and I think it might catch you off guard. It's silly, it's fun, but we'll go and get into it. So Nami solo. So oh, sorry, I'll just show the evolutions first. Actually, yeah, I'll show the evolutions first, but the reason why we're going to be taking Nami solo is because it works so well and synergizes so well with the melee influence setup. Basically, on the evolution, I get a +3 range, which is really good. It's a primed reach on the build. Melee damage, sprint speed, synergizes with what we're doing, and a bit of parkour velocity. Over here, I'm not going to lie to you, neither of these options are really that great, but you might as well go and take the on-equip attack speed for 4 seconds. Keep in mind, we're getting lots of attack speed from his second ability, so it doesn't really matter about the attack speed on here. Combo duration is mostly what I like on this one. If you do want to go ahead and take the follow through, you can do. I like the combo duration because you'll see my Riven for my Nami in a moment. And then I also got the increased base status chance. That is essentially the one that you do want. Lock that in because it's all status. Now, when it comes to a melee influence setup, it's going to be quite traditional. You are looking for elements that are all status heavy. So anything that says status chance, the odds are you could put it on the build. So for example, what I have here is status chance. This is a combination for gas. Gas is going to work really well in a melee influence setup. I'm going to have electric, and I'm going to go electric weighting. Now, keep in mind, this build isn't so much designed for Vault. This is just a traditional, typical Nami solo build. Before you go and turn around and say, oh, well, you got Vault, you don't need the Vault, you don't need all of this electric stuff on it. You're right, you can actually go and put other things in here. I'm not going to, though, because I'm just going to go and show you that this is what I would do for all my setups. I'm not going to go and take one just for Vault. I can't be bothered. But with Vault, you could go ahead and lower your electric weighting just a little bit. Now, on my Riven, I have the combo duration with the combo duration evolution, so I get almost 14 seconds of just combo duration, which works really, really well, and we'll explain combo duration in a moment, but I get the also electric in there as well. That is, so if you didn't have the Riven, you could literally just type in electric, and for most builds, you would end up going something like that instead, and this works great. And again, if you've got the Rhino's Roar, you don't need a faction mod in here. If you don't have Rhino's Roar, putting a faction mod in here wouldn't hurt you. It's not a bad idea, it just increases your kills. All right, so there's a 90% electric here, 90% or 92%, so it's actually better than what I've currently got. And I get even more range as well. So I'm getting a +5 range on my build from the evolution, evolve, and just a +2 here naturally. So I really like the Riven. It just gives me a little bit of quality of life. From there onwards, like I said, attack speed is also great, but keep in mind, Volt also gives attack speed. So this is making the attack really, really quickly. You don't need this. You could do Berserker, you could do Fury, you could do whatever you want over this one. Galvanized Elementalist is basically any status chance that does damage when it procs, this enhances it. So for example, Corrosive. Does Corrosive as an element go ahead and do damage when procced? No, it lowers the enemy's armor. It doesn't actually hurt the enemy, it just debuffs their armor. But something like electric, when electric procs, it does a chain between nearby enemies, stunning them and dealing damage over time. So again, if you want to know which ones it applies to, hover over it, it tells you /heat, electric, toxin, blast, and gas, and it also does magnetic. Keep that in mind, but magnetic is electric when it procs on the shields. So magnetic can still be technically classed and thrown in there, but it is an electric thing, electric side of it. Weapon wounds is going to be the scaling. So again, we're going to scale status as much as we possibly can. And condition overload, since we're doing lots of different elements, I am gaining lots of different, damage being stacked up on top of it. So what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 multiplied by 80 is 400%. 400% bonus damage on what I'm doing right now. Not gonna complain. And this is all because of the melee influence. I should have started with this part, but hopefully anyways. But melee influence basically just means on melee electric status, 20% chance for all melee status effects to spread over to other enemies nearby. So if I showed you what that looked like really quickly, if you've never seen a melee influence setup before, if I go ahead and just hit this enemy with no abilities on right now, I just need a 20% chance that it shifts over. So it has to be on an electric hit. Trust me, you'll notice the moment it procs. You ready? Wow, I am... there we go. I was getting RNG'd a lot there. It's still 20%, but the idea is I now go and do that with a whole bunch of things that amplify it. I'm going to end up proccing it quite rapidly, quite quickly as well, and those enemies are just going to end up dropping. All right, going to end up absolutely dropping. So the melee influence setup synergizes really well with someone like Volt, where his passive alone can also proc melee influence. Listen to what I'm saying. His passive alone can proc melee influence. His shield, if you shot through it with certain projectiles, can also proc it. Let me go and show you something like that just really quickly before we move into some gameplay. I want to go and show you this little one that I kind of cooked up just for a moment. There it is on the screen there. You can go and just put your eyes on it for a second. The only difference that I'm using here is going to be a heavy attack as well. So keep in mind, I do have viral on this thing. It's going to be adding electric towards it. I've not actually shot this with all of the abilities, by the way. I've only shot this without the abilities, and it does a good amount of damage. So this will be my first time we're seeing all the abilities applied as well. Melee influence, because we're going to be doing the electric. We're going to be doing galvanized reflexes. I will be killing enemies, and it's going to be heavy attacks as well. So this actually amplifies the heavy attack overall damage that I'm doing. I need the wind up speed on this, and I need the overall attack speed, as heavy attacks do 2 animations. There's the wind up, which is the really quick part, and then there's the actual animation of it attacking. So you want to do both of those in there. Although I could go and put condition overload on here and actually scale it a bit further, I'm not going to. But again, still relatively traditional. So this is what it would look like if I was to change what I was doing. Now I'll explain the Corufell really quickly. Let me go and shoot. You see, that's what the Corufell's doing. Okay, let's go ahead and put this here, put this here, put this here, put this here, and go ahead and shoot for the shields. And then, yeah, they're dead. Yeah, they're dead. So you can get some kind of fun. You can get some really kind of cool synergies going on here, right? As you can go and see there. Definitely something that kind of caught me off guard, and I wanted to go and promote this. I didn't do this on live stream, so this is the first time that anyone's kind of seeing it, including myself, with the abilities, and that's how that's looking there as well. Now, there are other things you can go and do with melee influence, and I will go and throw Rakta Dagger up on the screen really quickly, which is now weighted towards, again, also trying to help things like radiation. Now, radiation isn't what you'd normally go and put in the build, but the reason why we're going to put radiation into the build here is because it says when equipped, reduces enemies detection rate by 25% for 30 seconds. I have no idea why I read that part. I apologize. Nobody cares. The next part that we care about is damage to enemies affected by radiation status effect leeches 5% of the damage as shields. Yeah, as in, like, you can basically now just use this as your overall survival tool. So that would look something like this. So let's pay attention to my shields in the top right. Okay, and there we go. And there's my shields now. And as you can see, I didn't even do that with I didn't land a single spread of influence there. But that's what that's going to look like. This basically means so long as I'm hitting enemies, at this point, I can end up spreading and also getting myself shields back as well. All right, so the Rakta Dagger can also synergize really, really well with this overall setup. Now, I believe I've yapped for quite a fair bit. Let's go ahead and talk about the Archon Shards, and I'll go and give you guys some gameplay. So the Archon Shards really quickly, because, again, I will always say this in my videos, when it comes towards what you determine on your Exciter slot on a Warframe, do you go ahead and use Preparation or Prime Sure-Footed? Those are normally like the two biggest mods that I would use in the Exciter slot. You can use things like Cut and Drift, Power Drift, so forth if you want to, but because Volt doesn't have any way to technically stop a knockdown or a knockback or anything like that, since he doesn't have like overguard methods or whatever, I will now go ahead and use the Prime Sure-Footed in his build at that point. That being said, though, if you can go ahead and solve that issue, then you could go and use Preparation, all right? But because I can't use Preparation, I now use the maximum energy field on spawn Archon Shard in here. You can go and use the normal version of this. It does not need to be Talon Forged. It's just that this gives me a lot more energy. So as soon as I start the mission, I can use all my abilities and just start mowing enemies down the moment I spawn in, which is fantastic. From there onwards, it is literally Crimsons for ability duration. You can go Crimsons for ability strength if you want to run quicker and get more overall returns on your abilities, but I will be using ability duration because I prefer the quality of life. That's literally it. Now you might be thinking, what about the violence for overall ability damage and so forth? I would say yes, but not on this build. I believe so. I think it's yes, but it's not on this build. The ability damage needs to be applied on towards them, but then we're not actually using abilities for ability damage here. So that would be better on like a discharge kind of capacitance build or something else like that. It's not going to be as good on a Nami solo or whatever melee influence type setup that you're running as well. All right. And do keep in mind, you can go and use the Naramon focus school, which also just synergizes with a whole bunch of melee. So without further ado, let's go ahead and whack up on screen some gameplay of what you're about to go and see here. And as you will go ahead and just stare at what in the abomination is actually happening, enemies are literally falling over and they have no idea what is going on. You are gunning enemies down, but gunning with melees at this point. You are just running and gunning them down. They don't stand a chance. Okay, they won't stand. Acolytes won't stand a chance. Although Acolytes have a reduced threshold here because of the amount of overall elements that they can take. So if certain enemies have like an X amount of reduction, so Acolytes can only take like 4 electric procs, for example, therefore it's going to take a little bit longer to kill them. Other enemies like Frax and other new enemies like Warframe 999, yeah, they don't stand a chance. All right, they do not stand a chance. Although like the Babals, which are like the new enemies inside 999, are also still relatively tanky against this concept, but it doesn't really matter. Regardless though, you get the idea. Just make sure you go ahead and use your speed ability so you can go ahead and run them down. Your speed's going to be helping your passive. You're just going to keep sprinting and charging enemies down. You're going to be holding 1 to activate your shock trooper to go and get you more electric damage. As of right now, this is currently bugged in Warframe 999 patch, so do keep in mind that we'll go ahead and hopefully change after the 99 patch. Just give the developers time to go ahead and fix it. And then you got things like the electric shield to go and help you with survival. And then you got things like whatever subsumable you want to go and run in. I'm running Rhino's Roar because again, it gives me that extra damage towards the elements that are slowly proccing onto these enemies, just absolutely destroying them. So as you can go and see, this is and I like this quote that I got from one of my viewers. They said, I'm going to keep swinging and it's your fault if you walk into these swings. And I really like that. That literally sums this ability up, this entire build up. Just hold your melee button and keep walking towards enemies. Like they'll see you from like 50 meters away swinging. And if they don't move, that's on them, brother. Like, I mean, in fairness, you're so quick that they don't really have time to move. All right. So that's also going to be what's happening there, and it's entirely up to you which kind of melee weapons you want to go and be using. Take your time to experiment, but hopefully I've explained the builds really well. So I'm going to go and bring you guys back here now. What it do? I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I don't think there's much else to go ahead and talk about there. Now there's quite a lot of different vault builds in Warframe, but I wanted to go and promote the melee influence one because this one's just effortless and it's easy to go ahead and set up. It does take a bit of it does take a lot of time to go and get the build together, but it's one of those builds that is so incredibly worth it when everything comes together. So invest in it and reap all of the rewards that you get from it, right? It's one of those that I would heavily promote. Anyways, thank you guys for watching today's video. I really do hope that you enjoyed it, or maybe you learned a thing or two. If you did go enjoy it, leave a like. If you think there's someone else out there who could go ahead and enjoy the video as well, please go and share the video with a friend. If there's anybody out there who's wondering if I'm using the companion or what companion I'd go and use, I've just realized it's right at the end of the video. Use whatever you want to, it really doesn't matter. I'm going to use my Dagger companion as I always use. And thank you guys for watching. Anyways, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you are new. I just remember that, and I'll catch you guys again in the next video. Take care, everybody.